That fortunately is not going to happen because the chances of us are anchoring, as long as even a small group of us like this, a small group of people can make a huge difference in things like this. If they are people that incarnated from the right spaces for the right reasons as Templar guardians, and people don't get called to these workshops unless they actually incarnated for that reason. So you have in your code someplace some keys that were a gift to the shield. This is why sometimes it takes forever for the work to come, and it won't come until the group assembles. Because everybody drops a little bit of their keys, and it puts some missing sequences in the planetary grids that allows certain frequencies to anchor with the information that they need to get the next set. So this information that you'll see tonight is not just my information or me and Az's information. This is something all of you contributed to bringing in. We just wrote it down.
Hi, I'm Anna Salas, and some of you know me from Accelerated Conscious Evolution, or you may know me from the Keylontic Science marathon group that I run, where I share shield clinics based on Keylontic Science. I'm delighted to be able to do that, and one of the other things that I have progressed to along the way, when I began first exploring KS, I was kind of led to it, and the first workshop I was led to happened to be Sliders 12. And this was after I had already been doing my own work as an energy practitioner for, at least 20 years. So what I'd like to share with you today is a perspective, a response to a question that I asked. And this has to do with the shield split that happened in 2012, and that was with the three speakers. We know her name was Ashayana Deane then. We had Michael Deane, and we had Marianne Calloway, and they were the three speakers at that time. This shield split was very disruptive, and people formed camps. And some people sided with Michael, and some people sided with Ashayana. And interwoven into this shield split was a kind of a meme about dark flowering. And so I would like to share with those of you who are interested in this, because what the beloveds and Source, I do have a direct line, have asked me to do is to just offer an opportunity to generate a bridge between the challenges that sprung up as a result of the shield split. So I began to see, because I literally am working with the KS material all the time, every day. I'm delighted that I'm able to do that. And one of the things that I became aware of as I began to move through information that was first being shared in 2005, 2006, 2007, and onward. And I noticed a real subtle shift along the way from 2005, when the Kethradon Awakening Grid Masters Workshop was held in India. And the information that came out at that time about starburst and red pulse, and a tremendous amount of very specific, detailed information about what was happening. Now, what I've noticed in my review of every workshop, lots of information, hours and hours of paying attention now for 5 years. And one of the things that I began to notice as the work progressed was that Michael Deane, who was identified later on as Ashayana's Ionic twin, I noticed that in the Kethradon Awakening workshop, he was very, very upfront, and he expressed how his role as the masculine was to support the delivery of the content, the distribution of the content, and that he and Ashayana had a very specific masculine energetic dynamic that kept them in balance and enabled them to bring forth this wonderful body of metaphysics, spiritual science, bioenergetics, and wonderful information on how to stay healthy and well, learning how to use our own energy, how to replenish our own energy, and how to learn the techniques. And in the beginning, there were some rocky bits, and having been reviewing this material consistently now since 2018, I also identified some of those rocky bits because I'm someone who's coming from the Humbra level, and I can read the crystal discs, and that's been an enormous gift to me personally. I'm honored to be in that position. So I wanted to just identify a couple points. If you have an opportunity to view the Keylontic Awakening workshop, and if you would like to view that with me, there's a link below where you can let me know that that's something you're interested in, because I do hold 3-day shield clinics where I go over what I call the highlights of a particular workshop. I edit out the odd bits that really are not conveying information. They're more about logistics and dynamics. So you can let me know that you're interested. But what I noticed from 2005 on, from the Keylontic Awakening workshop in India on, where Michael was very present and speaking and reading and delivering content that Ashayana had brought through and translated, that as time went on, he began to have more and more of a back seat. And then by 2010, he was literally not speaking at all. And he was only speaking if he got permission to use the microphone from Ashayana. And so over the time of reviewing so many of these workshops, I began to see an imbalance happening between Ashayana and Michael. One other interesting thing that I noticed very early on, between 2005 and 2007, one of them happened to be with the Christ Star Awakening workshop. Another happened during the workshop in Ireland about the crystal body. There were very specific timelines and moments where interference from what we would call in the KS community Metatronic, I just call them Team Dark, influences and interference would show up at very particular moments in the recordings. Now, I'm very sensitive to sound and light encryption, and I can actually write sound and light encryption. So I began to be aware of when very early on, Michael would slip, but I would feel it as like a knife going through my third chakra. When he would make a simple little mistake, like putting a mylar upside down and reversed on the machinery, and it would show in front of everyone in the room for just a couple of seconds, and then he would correct it. I felt that energetically as interference. I think probably some people in the workshop were aware of feeling that energetically as direct energetic interference on their own spiritual anatomy, if they were that sensitive. And so I began to just notice when those moments were happening. I also began to notice when Ashayana became aware of an energy frequency that had moved into the room that she became aware of. And she would notice and she would ask, but she wouldn't necessarily get validation from anyone else. And so I began to see these things happening progressively and building over the timelines. Let's call them the timelines. And I watched and I noticed and I listened and I observed and I asked a lot of questions, lots of questions, because my favorite question in becoming an awakened person is what's really going on here? And when you have a direct line to source and to the beloveds, not as I can't even say the word, intercessories, as levels that you have to move through to to connect directly with source. This is not natural. the guardians and the energy beings that we identify and that have been identified for years now as belonging to different groups, they're not intercessories between your own direct connection to source. That's not their role. That's not what they're meant to do. What they're meant to do is to help you adapt, adjust, integrate, feel supported in aligning more and more with your own Christ star connection, from which you first emerged into this reality field. Lots more detail, which I'm not going to go into now, but I wanted you to be aware of this. So I was made aware through a dream time hop, inner planes adventure. I have these all the time, and people are aware that they see me on the inner planes, and there are many people that I've come to my classes that I teach in the multiverse. And then they recognize me later when they see me on YouTube or when they find me in a class that I'm teaching. This past week, as my own spiritual anatomy is awakening more and more rapidly and very deeply and very intensely, there was an experience that I had on the inner planes. I'm not going to go into detail here now, except that it really grabbed my attention. Thankfully, I woke up, literally conscious mind in this situation, completely lucid. I could see every detail. I could see the color of everyone's hair and eyes and be completely aware of my surroundings. And in awakening in this experience, I became aware that my own energy field had begun to be compromised by one or more relationships that I had been monitoring for some time, because I could feel the sound and light encryption was a little off. So once again, in having a conversation with someone, I asked the question, and this person asked the question, what happened in the shield split? And I took that question to my direct line to source, all the way up through the levels of council, all the way up to the crystal level, to the Humbra level, which is a real level, and you move through it through the deity planes. I dug deep and I asked, why had I had that experience in the multiverse? And why did I choose? Because I did choose consciously. I felt very uncomfortable in my body, and it roused me during my sleep. And I recognized it as the beaming of frequency from Team Dark that is trying to pull you, me, anyone into reversal. It's a very compressed, dense, very cramped feeling of energy that begins to slowly creep up the body. And for me, it happens from my feet up. And I think that's because the frequency beaming is being beamed into the earth. And we can be vulnerable to that depending on our level of our own maintenance, our own spiritual hygiene, shall we say. So I'm going to read to you what I wrote in my journal after digging in deep and wanting to get some information from the crystal Humbra level about what the shield split between Michael and Ashayana was all about. And if those of you who follow the information know that there was also a breach of what were called the violet and green shields, breach of Solomon. This is all related. And what I experienced was related. So hopefully I have enough light to read this by. I think I do. I can read my own handwriting. I dug deep and asked this question in me, going straight up into my Christ star organization of information. What generated the shield split between Michael and Ashayana? And as I reached into the Akashic records and located the specific particles of information that could provide at least some of the answer, I was guided into the awareness that over time, Ashayana became more masculine and confident in her capacity as a presenter. And if you've seen, if you quantum leap over the workshops, you will notice this yourself. I think it's very easy to see from 2005 on. At the same time, Michael became more and more absent or distant during the opening of workshops, where the agenda for the workshops, the protocols were laid out. And he began to speak less and less, and he was identified as speaker number 2. And Ashayana, more and more, stopped recognizing how Michael contributed his energy to generate the 2 become 3, become 1 spark that made it possible for her to bring that information through. Michael's masculine energy and the electrical magnetic relationship began to become more and more out of balance. So the imbalance was unrecognized. And gradually, very subtly, over time, because it was unrecognized, and I don't know that Michael and Ashayana, Deane had the personal time to sit down and have a conversation to say, hey, you know, what's going on here? And to be in full transparency about it, because as we all know, any of us have done this work for a while, we know how wounded we have been, especially if you are a walk-in, especially if you are an indigo child and or what's called a FIM, and you've walked in. Now, this is experience I had in 1989. I'm fully aware of it. Well, this reversal process was, how do I want to use the word here? It was utilized by Team Dark because they were able, in very small ways at that time, to tinker with the teliospheres, which are very much a part of the workshop in Ireland, which laid out the basic information for crystal body and also became the basis of information for the Kathara training. They were able to tinker in small ways with the teliospheres in Ashayana's system. And I think she felt this. She was very uncomfortable and felt herself being energetically attacked and assaulted. And this was in 2005 and earlier, before the Humbra crystal discs were able to be read, and some of the protections that came up later on were available even to her, because the frequencies were not yet able to be fully brought into the earth grids and accessed on the ley lines around the planet and then into our own bodies. So what I understood from the crystal disc level was that this accessed her hologram, changed her hologram, and rearranged from her personal perspective the living experiences that she was having with Michael. Michael was not rearranged in a similar way. Michael was rearranged at the teliosphere crystal body level differently. Now, both of them being so damaged on the D2 level, as most Earthlings are, up until very recently, and having very little available by way of what I would identify as Christic information. I feel that Ashayana could not consciously recognize this. I see her feeling it, but not being able to interpret it from only the place from where she was, which is true for all of us, which she was not yet fully. Certainly she hadn't accessed the crystal Humbra information yet. She was still pulling for it, still having, doing tremendous work, just getting this information through. So I don't think either Michael or Ashayana, at the point that their teliospheres began to be tinkered with, were fully prepared to do the emotional work that was required for them to get into the place where they would be able to do the work consciously and to stay in as much truth. That became difficult, even as Ashayana and Michael were working together still with the third way, which is source, for the two to become three, to become one. And Michael was likewise tinkered with in terms of his crystal body teliospheres as well. So now, if you understand from the blended wave, early on then, the two of them were experiencing each other through different holograms that were no longer connected fully by source because the frequency wasn't available. Now, this happened before I'm trying to read my handwriting here. It's difficult. Oh, here we go. It happened before or simultaneously with the unveiling of the crystal body information, which happened in an Ireland workshop. And this, I believe, is why the teliosphere tinkering happened while at the beginning, in the beginning, when the frequency of the Humbra was just making a very slight penetration into our distorted perceptual fields, our holograms, the emotional elemental level, the body and the chakra. None of this had been fully unveiled yet. It's pretty early on. So I think once Team Dark was able to break in and subtly reorganize Michael and Ashayana's teliospheres at the crystal body level, it was too late to be noticed by either Ashayana or Michael. They felt it, but they didn't know what to do with it because the emotional body work was not fully engaged yet. And slowly, subtly, the reversals necessary to generate the shield split and the split between Ashayana and Michael to function as an exquisitely refined and aligned divine pair was damaged. Now, this is what I feel, see, hear, and know, and I'm just asking you to listen if this is interesting to you, because if there's anything in it that resonates with you, you will also see, feel, hear, and know. Gradually, the pleasure and the sexual spark between Michael and Ashayana, which at the beginning of their relationship, we know from how people saw them interacting early on, was very passionate, and which did not eventually sufficiently spark, Ashayana. The spark has to happen between divine feminine and divine masculine, and that had been tinkered with. And so they were starting to go like this, separating from the third way, which is where the sparking between masculine and feminine and source happens. And I just think as a result of this, that Ashayana became more needing to generate her own spark with her inner and masculine and feminine so she could continue to bring the information through, while Michael receded more and more, speaking less, and then he became more of a manager, organizing the Shadra shields at workshops with people, moving people in places and organizing that information. Mathematical, still electrical, still masculine. And then he just was moving mylars, moving the mylars off and on the machine. And so I wonder if his perception of his role being the masculine electrical, with a fairly good balance of feminine energy, began to experience a form of energetic emasculation. And maybe this triggered in Michael, in his own D2 level in his emotional body, a form of very subtle energetic aggression that Ashayana picked up in her teliospheres and formed this energetic aggression into physical expressions of aggressions through her teliospheres and her own hologram being manipulated. And these happened for her. These were experiences that she had. But this doesn't mean that in Michael's expression in his hologram, that these were actually, quote, things that he did. And I can tell you from knowing very close firsthand how the fatally operate, this is what they would have done. They would have created a split reality, not only a shield split, but a split reality between Michael and Ashayana, where they very slowly began not to trust each other and to feel weird energy happening between them that they couldn't explain yet. So, Team Dark, generating separation, and then two completely different versions of reality. This is their expertise. This is what we're living in inside of the blended reality on two-dimensional Earth, the variations of Earth, 3D, 2D, 1D, that we're starting to break away from and be free from. And the connection between Michael and Ashayana, the connection to the third way, which is source, Mane, Manu, Ire, right, was broken. And despite all the recognition of the fatally dynamic in lectures on dark flowering, I don't think that either Ashayana or Michael were yet fully having access to the crystal body Humbra level information to perceive and hear what was going on and have the communication, sound and light code communications with each other, holding the space of the third way between each other to regroup and then reignite the dynamic that included the third way of source. So talking about source very subtly became the activity of calling on the beloveds. From my perspective, in the same way that denominational Christians pray to intercessory angels. So once more, we had more and more intercessory councils being introduced rather than the anchored claiming of the direct connection to source. That began to gradually become something that was talked about. Until eventually, with the Alhambra information coming through, and the diamond sun, then it was the Humbra crystal level CDT plates, which I had access to, began to bring things in. And then there had to be a correction. There had to be a correction for us to be where we are today. It was a painful correction for people who were directly involved in this shield split in 2012, and now I was not among those people. But I have spoken to many of them. I have listened to the deep pain that they felt and their perceptions. And one perception was that Ashayana was dark flowered. But I don't know if people recognize that Michael was dark flowered in the sense that his crystal body had been tinkered with. All right. So the dial up to source became the floating Buddhas team, right? And the beloveds began to replace the direct link to source, and then just became the intercessories to getting to your Christ star. And the direct connection of two becoming three, becoming one, one becoming three, becoming two was lost. And that's where I want to leave you today, with this possibility of this is how the shield split was engineered by Team Dark at a time that nearly took the entire MCEO and all the teachings into kamikaze and into a tremendous split. And very, very painful experience for many people. Now, I will tell you from my own experience that Team Dark is still working this angle today. This is their playbook. And so I wanted to share this with you because if you feel that you have entered into a twin relationship, be aware that some of the difficulty that you are having is being generated at your crystal body level, your twin's crystal body level and your twin's crystal body level. And because of that, you are not able to blend properly through breath, through exercises, through all the levels of communication. You may be able to blend slightly at the heart level, but everything else is starting to be left out or could be left out, including sacred sexuality. Sacred sexuality is part of the intentional spark of two become three, become one. And for those of us, it doesn't include me because I never did the Kundalini practice. If you've had a Kundalini awakening and then you've awakened, you may still be dealing with challenges that are brought by not bringing your sacred energy up directly through your root chakra without any interweaving, which is the experience that I had. And so you may be slightly behind in terms of where you are located as we map time through the crystal spiral. I'll be sharing this next workshop with people because although I've done it before, I don't think people really got it. And I have to say, based on the experience that I had in the multiverse this past week, I got a lot of information and I'm very happy to share it with you. So for those of you who have been involved with KS, I just wanted to share this as a possible bit of filling in some of the blank spaces about not understanding how the shield split between Michael, Deane, and Ashayana, Deane, and Marianne Calloway was a minor player in all of this. I don't know that they messed with her that much. But I can testify to how through someone you love, Team Dark can and will get to you and begin to manipulate you and begin to manipulate the person that you love so that you begin to mistrust each other. You begin to mistrust each other and doubt each other, and you become afraid to be together. And so the gorgeous energy that you are supposed to be bringing into divine union as we move forward, especially now in 2023, if you've had that experience, it's going to become diminished and tarnished unless you take active ownership of it and take active ownership and responsibility for your process with yourself, and in absolute truth, transparency, frank, honest conversation with the person who is your twin, fontic, adjugate twin. None of this is an excuse not to generate the spark that is masculine, source, feminine energy, sparking and phasing. And if you've been damaged by dark flowering, your ability to spark and phase truly beautifully, divinely, and Christically with your twin is going to be compromised. I'm describing it to you now because I'm in the experience. Now, fortunately, I woke up inside of it, and I was able to say, no. I'm not going to go into those details with you. I hope you will feel what I'm saying. If it resonates with you, you'll know. But I don't think that I could do what I do in the work that I do it with so much joy and gratitude and appreciation, with my direct line to source and my Christ star intact, and my being so energetically sensitive that I can feel and I can see and I can hear the tiniest of glitches. And I hope you will trust me on this when I tell you this. It's real. Being able to do this is a real thing. And it's actually part of what my energy field brings in from Adore, if you're familiar with that term, as part of how I'm sharing information from source through your Christ star, through the beautiful support of the beloveds, not intercessory agents, support. I hope you can hear me. And I'm very grateful that I was able to wake up in the dynamic and then ask the question and then get this information and share it with you, and you will make of it what you will. But it was really important for me to make this video for you, and now it's done, and I will share it. Peace and blessings from me, Anais Salas, and 2023 is here, and we have made the time leap that we needed to make for those of us who are fully prepared to be on the Christic spiral, to stay on it, and to hold our own direct lines in clarity, in integrity, in co-creation, responsibly, moving forward, so that we can open the gates, hold the gates, and do what we came here to do. Thank you for watching.